Representative Brand has House File 3030.
This one doesn't. Oh, thank you. I just like that.
And we do have, so that bill is in your packet, as well as a fiscal note, but there will be an amendment to the bill. So the fiscal note was based on the previous version, I think. So there may be a new fiscal note coming. But Representative Brand, would you like to
Yes,
begin?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that the House File 3030 be laid over for future consideration.
Thank you, Representative Brand. And just a comment on that, I think there'll be plenty of discussion on this, and we're eager to learn more about this bill and what benefits it has for all of us. So we are just laying it over for now, and we'll maybe be addressing it in the future. But you would like to also move the amendment.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to move the A1 amendment. A1 amendment makes a couple of grammatical changes, but also makes a little bit of a substantive change. This was a peace in the valley sort of amendment as well, to also include 100% juice and chocolate milk along the default children's meal beverage on the menu.
All right, so
I think the most important part of it, though, too, of that amendment also switches the Attorney General to the Commissioner of Health, which I think is, and I've always had a concern about that, it makes it a little bit more appropriate in my mind.
okay, and the enforcement.
Yep.
So we will have you describe the bill in a moment after we get the amendment on. It's the author's amendment. Any questions? Seeing none, I'd like to take a vote on that. So all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? Okay, so the motion prevails, the amendment is adopted, the bill is in the form that you are seeking it to be, and I just want you to then begin by presenting the bill. Let us know what it is.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. First, let me just talk a little bit about what this bill isn't. It's not a mandate. This bill does not take away a parent or a consumer's right to choose which beverage they want for their children's meal. But what it is, it's a bill that touches on a subject I think that we have to have a little bit more conversation at the Capitol about. Eating habits develop in youth. I've got a 5 and an 8-year-old at home, and so I know that once in a while we go out, and if it's mentioned pop, and us as parents, we don't want pop, we'd rather have milk or juice, that kind of ends the discussion, so to speak, because the 5 and the 8-year-old heard pop, and so that's automatically what they want. Surveys show in Minnesota that youth are drinking more and more sugary beverages each year. And also I might add that eating out used to be something that happened infrequently, but as we live busier lives these days, eating out and grabbing fast food is trending on an upward dynamic in Minnesota, but also across the country. So as we grab those meals, restaurants, kids' meals prepare a larger percentage of their food, and as a result, children's meals have calories that also are increased because of the pop with added calories from sugar. Sugary drinks include pop, lemonade, sweetened fruit-flavored beverages, and other beverages with added sugar. It doesn't include flavored milk. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Heart Association, on average, children in America drink about a bathtub full of pop every year. That's 30 gallons. That's a lot, in my opinion. So one of the things I think that this bill can do also is it can help parents on the go to make healthier options and healthier choices for the children by removing the sugary drinks from those options. This bill would do just that, support parents in making healthier choices. Let's also remember why this bill is in committee, not just the food aspect, but also it's worth reminding the committee that we lost over 300 dairies in Minnesota last year. And part of that undoubtedly is consumer demand is starting to wane off a little bit. And so I know that farmers want this. In fact, this bill was brought to me from a senator who had farmers in her district who requested such legislation be having a conversation in the Capitol. So here we are today having this conversation. I happen to have grown up on a dairy farm. I understand what it's like for dairy farmers to make the tough decisions of selling their cattle herd like we had to do in 1996. And if there's an option that we can do to help provide awareness of the fact that there are other healthy beverages that are out there and help support farmers in our neighborhoods and the farmers in our counties and districts, that's also part of the reason why we're hearing the bill today. And so what I would like to do right now is I'd like to turn it over to a couple people who wish to testify on behalf of this. First, I'd like to call down Janet Bremer. Janet, can you come down, please?
Welcome to the committee, and if you'll just state your name and begin your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and representatives. My name is Janet Bramer, and I am a dairy farmer along with my husband John in Hastings, Minnesota. I'm also the Minnesota Dairy Princess Coordinator, which means I work with Princess K of the Milky Way. So when you go to the state fair, which I know you all will, and you visit the butter sculptures, those are my girls. But today I'm not going to talk about butter. I'm going to talk about milk. Milk is, as you know, Minnesota's state official drink, and my husband and I are proud to be part of the 2,500 dairy farmers that produce it every single day. It was 1 year ago today when my husband John and I attended the Dairy Day at the Capitol, and while visiting with Senator Bigham and Representative Juergens, John, my husband, expressed an idea. So you've got us to blame for this one. His idea was making milk the default beverage for children's meals. It was an idea that he had read about in a farm magazine. Another state had had this already adopted. Now, I could sit here and I could tell you all the benefits about milk. I could tell you about the 9 essential nutrients that were found in milk, and I can also tell you about the health benefits. But I'm going to leave that to the health advocacy groups that are here today. My husband and I are 5th, and I'm a 6th generation dairy farmer. I guess you could say farming is definitely in our blood. John and I have always been active advocates for the dairy community. Almost 30 years ago, I was giving a tour on our farm to school children, and after describing a typical day on the farm that begins about 6 a.m. and ends about 14 hours later, and also talking about how we care for our animals and how we care for our land, a 3rd grader raised her hand and said, "So what does your husband do for a job?" That really got me to thinking how important it is for us to tell our own story, what we do, why we do it, and the benefits of dairy foods. And it's not only important for us to share that with children, but also to share it with adults as well. So my hope today is to give you a glimpse of my family's passion for the dairy industry. We participate on social media. We host farm tours. We do school visits. We host a huge Christmas on the Farm event. And I've also even had several opportunities to promote dairy with the Minnesota Vikings. And today I'm here before you sharing my dairy story and the importance of milk, advocating in a much different way. Minnesota's dairy industry has a $9 billion impact on the state. Farm employees, veterinarians, processing plants, transportation companies, retailers, all rely on part with the dairy industry and their contributions. We dairy farmers have been struggling financially. I know you've heard that story before. I know you've heard about low milk prices, poor mental health, and many dairy farmers that are leaving the career that they love. Minnesota's dairy farmers need your help. This bill could help lay the groundwork for revitalizing the dairy industry. Fluid milk sales have slipped in several years, and recently, partially due to children being given the opportunity of having those sugary beverages. As dairy farmers, we hope you join us in support of this bill, which does not take away choices, but hopefully helps nudge people in the right direction of a healthier future for their children. And it simultaneously also benefits dairy farmers. I'm hoping that you will also incorporate that Minnesota's official drink is going to be a part of children's meals. Thank you very much for your time and your consideration.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Brand?
Yep. Next, I'd like to ask that Moa Vezan come down. He represents Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Thank you.
Welcome to the committee, and if you'll state your name and perhaps spell it as well before you begin the testimony.
Sure. I was here last year, I believe, and my name was a challenger, but it's pronounced Vajong Moa, and I'm the Director of Health Equity Advocacy at Blue Cross and Blue Shield. I want to first thank you, Madam Chair, and the members of this committee and for hearing and hopefully supporting this bill. I want to begin by recognizing strong alliance with Hunger Day at the Hill. This is not just a issue that impacts hungry and poor people, but it impacts health. And I would say this committee's work is deeply related to the support for hunger relief. I also want to recognize the name of this committee. It's not lost on me that you're called Agriculture and Food Financing, right? And it's my understanding that that is a new title just last year. And so you may be wondering, why is Blue Cross Blue Shield in this committee? We're more accustomed to being in Health and Human Services. And I just want to call out that not only is it a cool cross-sector collaboration, what public health science tells us is that most of what creates health happens outside of healthcare. In fact, 80% of what creates health is outside healthcare. And so that actually implicates the agriculture system, the food system. And if we're serious about preventing chronic disease, diabetes, heart disease, we have to be comprehensive, we have to be upstream, and in the name of prevention, begin working with different sectors that impact downstream diseases like diabetes. And so I'm here today not to talk about milk, although I stand in strong solidarity with our milk farmers. I come from a family and people of farmers. In fact, my people have been farming for millennia, and that's the only occupation my people have ever known until actually coming to this country. And so I want to be very clear that there's a convergence of interests between farming, food, public health, and health equity. I also want to recognize that Blue Cross Blue Shield stands in partnership with the Minnesotans for Healthy Kids Coalition. I will hand out a letter of support so you can see the list of supporters. I invite you to peruse all the various names. It's a very strong healthcare, nonprofit, cross-cultural, cross-sector partnership so that you can see that there's a mountain of support for this approach to advancing health. I do want to call out a concern about the amendment. We certainly want to support our dairy farmers and make sure health is the default choice. But we also recognize that in chocolate milk, there are 6 teaspoons of sugar in just one cup of chocolate milk. And I think that warrants more discussion. Okay. We are supportive of 100% juice. That's according to the American Heart Association and basically every health authority, it's a good thing. But we just need to call the question on chocolate milk. Okay. It just warrants more discussion on our part. Yeah. As I mentioned, most of what creates health happens outside healthcare, and that's why we're here today. I also want to connect this more closely to a preventative approach to diabetes and call out the immense healthcare costs associated with diabetes. In Minnesota alone, it costs the state $4.4 billion in medical costs. This is just for diabetes, okay? $4.4 billion in our state. I also want to call out that 1 in 3 children and teens eat fast food on a daily basis, and parents simply just want healthier options and healthier choices as the default option. Not to eliminate choices, but to make sure that it's the most convenient, not just the smartest decision. While diabetes is a public health issue and it impacts all of our communities, it's very important that we lift up how the burden of disease is not equitable. We know that in Minnesota alone, the American Indian community has 4 times the rate of diabetes as the general population. The African American community has 1.5 times diabetes compared to the general population, and the Asian Pacific community has 3 times the amount of diabetes. And so while diabetes is a public health epidemic, we need to call out that the burden of disease is not playing out equitably. And so your efforts and consideration today would have a very serious and strong health equity impact. And it's beyond just the moral imperative and addressing the cross-cutting inequities. There's a very real financial cost to this. That inequity, that difference in health, a study produced by the University of Minnesota concluded that these inequities cost us $2.26 billion a year here in Minnesota. And I just want to emphasize that these diseases are primarily preventable. They're primarily preventable. Okay? And what can $2.26 billion get you? It can construct 54 hospitals. It can construct 15 high schools. And that's on an annual basis. And so I want to be mindful that as I'm making a quantitative argument, that the centerpiece of this is saving lives and improving health. But it's not only the right thing to do, it's the effective thing to do. And so we are looking at the environment, and we want to make sure health is built into our natural environment, that it's the first choice, it's the natural choice, it's not the smart, savvy choice, and that you have to dig around to make health the top choice. So today, we support Representative Brand and all the authors in bringing forward legislation that would make kids' health, parents' choice, focus on health, and making that the default option. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Representative Brand, any other testifiers?
Yes, I don't see Melvin Anderson here, but is there anybody else here from Youth Determined to Succeed? I had the invite to them, and they indicated they wanted to be here. Well, maybe not today then. Okay, but I know that Stu Laurie is here from the Minnesota Farmers Union. When we had our press conference, Minnesota Farmers Union was also in support, so I'd like to invite him down.
Welcome to the committee, Mr. Laurie.
Thank you, Chair Poppy and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Stu Laurie. I'm the Government Relations Director for Minnesota Farmers Union. And I'll be brief, just want to echo some of the thoughts that the Bremers so well shared earlier in their testimony, but I've had the opportunity to speak to some of our dairy farmer leaders on this bill. Of course, they're proud of the healthful product that they produce and believe that that this would make it easier for parents to make a good decision for their kids, and to the extent that it increases the consumption of dairy in Minnesota, that will improve their bottom line, and we're eager to support it. So thanks so much, Representative Brand, and for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Laurie. I don't see any questions. I know we do have somebody on the list, Ben Wogsland from Hospitality, Minnesota. Yes. So welcome to the committee. Just state your name and begin your testimony.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, committee staff. My name is Ben Wogsland. I'm the Director of Government Relations for Hospitality, Minnesota. We represent the restaurant industry, lodging industry, and resorts and campground industry in Minnesota, supporting 1 in 10 jobs in Minnesota, I believe over $6 billion in wages, and generate 18% of the Minnesota sales tax, so a very significant part of the Minnesota economy here. I want to start out by just saying we appreciate the spirit of what Representative Brand is trying to do with the bill here. Obviously, we support healthy choices for kids. And frankly, Minnesota restaurants have actually been leaders in that regard in recent years. If you look around both at quick service or QSR restaurants and full service restaurants, the vast majority of kids' meals now include some of these options. So whether that be water, whether that be milk or a milk alternative. we've been working with the author as well as the author and the other body, however, to clarify that there are other healthy options that are currently offered side by side with milk or water or milk alternatives, and that includes 100% juice options or chocolate milk. And so thankful for the amendment today, and just wanted to put that on the record and make sure that we're able to continue to work with the author as this bill goes forward to make sure that we're protecting consumer choice and that we're also including all the scope of healthy options on the menu and advertising materials and things of that nature. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wagsland. Any other testifiers? Anyone else in the audience who would like to come down to speak for or against or provide any testimony? I don't see anyone else. Members, any questions? Representative Keel, I think you had a comment or question, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Representative Brand. Certainly, we want to be promoting our children to drink milk, and I would even go so far as to suggest that we should maybe be starting to encourage our children to not just drink any milk, but drink whole milk. Because anyone knows that when an infant is born, the best thing that they have is mother's milk, and it is full of cholesterol. And so while we've gone back in our world of thinking we need low fat, I've spent a little bit of time researching all of this in my own life, and think that maybe our children would be fuller, faster, and more satisfied with a little bit more fat in their diet, and helping their little brains to expand is important. I also wanted to point out something, members, if you don't know, audience, I am a sugar grower. So when I hear from the Department of about sugar, I want to tell you that sugar's not bad for you. Overeating sugar is not any better for you than eating only broccoli. It is not healthy to have one thing. I would like to point out to you that there is 20 calories in a teaspoon of sugar, and milk naturally has sugar in it. And if you go to the grocery store, and I encourage you all to do this, go look at your milk. Look and see what skim milk has for the amount of sugar in it to whole milk. Whole milk is actually less sugar. I would also share with you that chocolate milk is not horrible for you. I survived on it. I didn't drink white milk when I was a kid. For some reason, it bothered me, and my parents allowed me to. Anyway, but I think it's the balance of how much sugar you have in that drink, not the fact that it's bad. But I just want to point out that milk is good for kids. I think we need to push more whole milk. I have grandchildren that drink raw milk, dairy. They don't even like that carton stuff anymore. And that's what their father grew up on, so that's what they enjoy. But I just want to point out that we need to be promoting good things for our children, and I want to also point out sugar's not bad. Just don't eat a lot of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Keel. Yes, I think that was the comment of Blue Cross Blue Shield talking about that, kind of the balance. But
You're right.
Appreciate your always your advocacy for the industry and the work that you do. So thank you for that. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I, too, support the idea of encouraging more milk consumption, not only for kids, but for adults as well.
True.
Just have a concern about the bill in general, and this is not, again, the impact of the intent. But Representative Brand, you say it's not a mandate, yet the bill summary, the first line says the bill requires, and bill language says on line 1.17, must make, and on page 2, line 10, now it's the Commissioner of Health must enforce this section. So just kind of soothe the soul here with what is the actual intent, and if there's any kind of enforcement action, what do you contemplate that to be?
Representative Brand.
Madam Chair, thank you. To answer your question, Representative Anderson, if you look at subdivision 3, it says there's no prohibition. And so that's exactly what was meant to be in there. Specifically the layout, there's no mandate. You can get whatever you want. There's no penalty. There's going to be no surcharge with this bill, that sort of thing. As far as enforcement goes, we talked with the Department of Health. They have a $0 fiscal note. They don't anticipate it costing much or taking a lot of resources. If somebody, a consumer, were to complain, they would take that complaint and do the research on it, but they don't anticipate doing very much of that.
Representative Anderson.
Thanks again, Madam Chair. Well, that's good to hear, although in the fiscal note, which may be not important anymore, it talked about constitutional challenge. Comment on that.
Representative Brand.
Constitutional challenge, I guess I wasn't, I didn't see that part in there, but maybe I'll have to relook at that. Hold on 1 second. And you're talking about the Attorney General or the children's, or the health department?
It's the very last line on page 9.
Page 9, okay.
Fine. Representative Anderson, where were you referencing from? Sorry.
Well, it's on the fiscal note
Oh,
that we
okay.
received.
Got it.
Again, it may be out of date because it's Attorney General, but it did mention a challenge
Right.
on page 9.
Okay, thank you. So Representative Brand, just see that on,
Yeah, let's see here. It's if a constitutional challenge were to arise, the attorney, we have, I know at one point there was a challenge of whether or not we could do something like this in the menu, but I don't see that this challenge still exists. Just getting some quick counsel on that as well.
I think, and we can ask the council to just, on this fiscal note, maybe Mr. Savory or Mr. Sullivan, I don't know who wants to answer it, but just regarding the fiscal note and how up-to-date it is based on the amended bill, and Mr. Savory.
Madam Chair and members, just to clarify, because of the amendment the committee approved or is now on the bill, the Attorney General would not play a role in the enforcement action of House File 3030 should it become law. So with that said, I understand the question, but I think that going forward, the Attorney General wouldn't really have a role to play in any sort of action regarding that. It would first be a health department concern.
Thank you. So I think we've got a number of pages of this. It looks like some of them are related to the Attorney General and others, maybe the Ag Department or other things. So I don't know if there's, but there will be a different fiscal note based on the amended bill now. And we are laying this over. I think there is further discussion, people will, the concept, the idea, helping our kids to guide them to, make those choices, those healthy choices is important for us. We have another, Representative Anderson, were you done with questions?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, Representative Lippert.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Brand, for just inviting us to have this conversation. I'm looking at the Minnesotans for Healthy Kids Coalition letter that's in front of us, and the list of health organizations behind this bill is significant, and I think we should be paying attention to that. The image of our children drinking a bathtub's worth of soda a year is a really powerful image. I saw everyone reacting to that as that was being mentioned. And as a parent with children myself, and when we go out to eat, we try to make sure that if they're ordering soda, they don't get it until the meal arrives, or we realize that they don't eat their meal because they're just drinking the soda. So I think this is a significant conversation for the health of our children and our state, and I appreciate you starting it today.
Thank you. So I don't see any other questions. And Representative Brand, any closing comments?
Yep, I'll close just by reiterating that fact, that 30 gallons, that comes from the American Society of Pediatrics and the American Heart Association. So that's pretty standard information right now, and that's average child. Some eat more, some eat less, obviously. That also doesn't take into account any food that also might contain sugar. So on average, they're probably consuming more than 30 gallons worth. But it's important to note that. I just want to take a minute to point out the Center for Science and the Public Interest put out a 19-pager last year, July of 2019. Soda still on the menu. Progress, but more to do to get soda out of restaurant children's menus. And I guess the really interesting thing is that in the 1970s, only 26% of people went out to eat. And now that's over half of, and that's on a daily, or no, on a weekly basis, rather. Now that number is over half. So over half of the Americans go out on a weekly basis out to eat. We're grabbing stuff on the go in the interest of supporting families, in the interest of supporting healthy families, providing maybe a little bit more focus on a nutritious beverage like milk is in the interest of public consumer protection and that sort of thing. And so I really look forward to working on this bill. I really look forward to working on the bill and getting into another committee and passing this off. I really think it will benefit a lot of people across the state, not just children, but also the farmers who produce the milk. And we should all be in the interest, I guess, of building stronger communities. That's part of the reason I wish to be here in the first place, is to help build stronger communities. And I do think that this bill will do that. So I appreciate your support today. And I would ask again to renew my motion to lay this bill over for possible consideration.
Thank you. Thanks for that discussion. Thank you, Mrs. Bremer, for giving us the insight and how this all came to be. And, it's good to have citizen input and constituent engagement, and we appreciate that. So thank you. So thanks for the discussion today. This bill will be laid over for future consideration.